He cruised up to Parkside Motors, rolling in his gleaming Escalade with prototype cargo modules gleaming in the back, only to be stopped cold. A valet in pressed uniform stepped forward, arm outstretched. "Sir, we can't bring that vehicle on the floor," he stated, voice polite but unwavering. In that flash, Charlie Thompson, the black CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a company shattering the billion-dollar barrier, found himself relegated to the curb. The engine's hum faded under the weight of bias. Cameras caught the moment, prestige denied by prejudice. Heart pounding. Charlie faced a choice: accept this insult or turn it into power. If you stand for swift justice, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and comment. What would you do in his place? Charlie sat for a heartbeat longer, the valet's refusal echoing like thunder. The Escalade's leather seats felt suddenly cramped, as if the luxury interior itself conspired to remind him of his exclusion. He'd pictured strides across polished tile, the press's eager flashes, the board's nod of approval, yet here he was, stalled on the pavement. Sterling Dynamics had transformed urban transport through smart logistics. Now its CEO faced perhaps the deepest irony of his career, a barrier erected by racial bias. He exhaled slowly, regaining composure. The dealership's chrome facade reflected his silhouette, a man of power paused by prejudice. He stepped out of the vehicle, the door's soft thud marking his resolve. The valet's spotless white shirt and brass nameplate mocked professional decorum while betraying an undercurrent of dismissal. Charlie tipped his chin upward, voice low but resolute. "Good afternoon. Charles Thompson. I have a demonstration scheduled." The attendant's clipped nod came without meeting Charlie's eyes. "Our policy doesn't allow SUVs inside," he replied, clipboard shaking faintly. His statement, curt and final, was a mask for the deeper judgment at play. A silent line had been drawn between acceptable and other, and Charlie's Escalade, with its bold profile and custom cargo attachments, sat squarely on the forbidden side. Charlie's mind raced through the day's itinerary: investors waiting in the VIP lounge, design journalists queued for interviews, engineers eager to showcase integrated lock systems. His prototype cargo system, sleek, modular, carbon fiber reinforced, wasn't just a product. It was proof that Sterling Dynamics could command both luxury and functionality in one package. That promise now loitered behind locked doors. Rather than erupt, Charlie reached into his suit jacket and retrieved his phone. With a steady hand, he dialed Tim Harris, Parkside's regional director. Each ring amplified the attendant's discomfort. Finally, a voice answered. "Charlie, you're at the showroom?" Charlie's tone held no anger, only firm expectation. "Yes, Tim, I'm here. My appointment stands." "Why won't you let my vehicle in?" On the other end, the click of keyboard keys and a muffled, "Let me check," signaled the director's scramble. As Charlie waited, he closed his eyes and recited his own mantra, composed authority. He thought of the countless meetings where his presence shifted outcomes of boardrooms, where his strategic acumen won rival praise. Here, curbside, he drew on that same strength. A small crowd of onlookers gathered, dealership staff, curious customers, creating an unintended audience. The attendant's earlier politeness wilted under the spectator's gaze. Moments later, Tim's voice crackled through Charlie's earpiece. "Charlie, I see your booking. Let me handle this." Charlie clicked the phone closed and turned back to the attendant. "You'll accommodate the demonstration," he said, voice calm but unignorable. "The prototype moves inside or we reschedule elsewhere." The valet's jaw clenched, perspiration beaded at his collar. He glanced toward the showroom doors and then back at Charlie, the rustle of his new policy excuse colliding with the CEO's unyielding calm. The attendant's walkie-talkie squawked. A manager approached Parkside's liaison, clipboard in hand, shoulders tight with duty. Charlie recognized her from earlier emails. Her expression flickered from surprise to contrition. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we apologize. Please follow me to our service bay, fully equipped for demonstrations." Her words were brisk but carried a hint of acknowledgement. The bias had been called out and would no longer stand. Charlie nodded and gathered his guests: an automotive editor, a venture partner, a Sterling Dynamics board member. They followed him past the showroom entrance to a spacious service area, its concrete floors and high ceilings stark but functional. Mechanics paused to watch as Charlie meticulously unpacked his cargo modules. Each piece gleamed under the service bay's industrial lights, locking slides, telescoping rails, seamless interfaces designed to integrate with luxury SUVs. Standing amid the hum of hydraulic lifts and power tools, Charlie launched into his demonstration. His voice regained its natural cadence, authoritative, informative, brimming with confidence. He guided the mechanics and guests through load tests and simulated terrain challenges. With every click of a lock mechanism and every whisper of carbon fiber sliding into place, the audience's attention shifted fully to innovation, not indignity. The atmosphere crackled with excitement. One by one, the onlookers' dealership staff included leaned-forward questions tumbling out. What's the weight capacity? How do you handle theft prevention? Charlie answered crisply, thorough and unflustered. This was the showcase he'd envisioned, just in a different venue. Each successful demo step rattled the old narrative of exclusion, forging a new storyline of expertise overcoming prejudice. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Campus Motors' director had escalated the matter to senior management. Security footage was reviewed. Emails confirming the appointment were circulated. By the time Charlie zipped up the last cargo compartment, the dealership's higher-ups had arrived. They escorted him and his guests back through the showroom entrance this time, with doors held wide and staff giving respectful nods. The prototypical display was set beneath the gleam of showroom lights just as planned. Charlie guided the final loading of his cargo into the showroom display vehicle, his posture regal. The CEO's presence, once blocked by bias, now commanded the space. Cameras flashed as the demonstration concluded, with applause a testament to perseverance and professionalism. Charlie thanked the staff, acknowledging the apology extended by the general manager, whose handshake was firm and sincere. As he climbed back into his Escalade, Charlie allowed himself a single satisfied smile. 15 minutes had elapsed between refusal and acceptance, but it felt like a lifetime of lessons distilled into one decisive moment. He settled into the driver's seat, the engine's hum now a triumphant anthem. Sterling Dynamics' prototype cargo system had made its debut. Prejudice had been confronted and respect had been earned. Charlie pulled away from Parkside Motors under bright afternoon sunlight, the dealership's polished sign reflecting off his rear window. In that reflection, he saw more than the fading showroom. He saw the power of resolve in the face of injustice. No scripted apology could erase the initial sting, but the swift reclaiming of his narrative stood as a testament when dignity is denied confidence and preparedness can turn the tide. Charlie stepped back from the curb and allowed himself a moment to breathe. The prototype cargo modules, sleek modular black units engineered for precision, rested safely behind him, the initial sting of rejection already slipping into the past. Now, as he surveyed the scene from the service bay's threshold, his mind returned to the journey that had brought him here. Sterling Dynamics was not just a company. It was Charlie Thompson's life's work, a testament to what one determined individual could accomplish against the odds. He remembered the early days long before million-dollar revenues and global offices. He'd started in a cramped Brooklyn garage, tinkering with electric motors and recycled materials, convinced that sustainability and style could coexist. His first breakthrough arrived on a rainy afternoon when he fitted a reclaimed laptop battery into a repurposed golf cart, coaxing it to run cleaner and farther than any standard model. Investors scoffed at the idea then. Who cares about green golf carts, one had sneered. Yet that prototype laid the groundwork for the company's first patent, and soon Sterling Dynamics was designing hybrid drivetrains that major manufacturers couldn't ignore. Fast forward 12 years, and Sterling Dynamics posted annual revenues north of $750 million, with research labs from Detroit to Dusseldorf and regional offices in Shanghai, Sao Paulo, and Johannesburg. Charlie himself, first in his family to graduate college, had navigated every boardroom from Manhattan high-rises to Silicon Valley boardrooms, coaxing billion-dollar partnerships from skeptical executives. Under his leadership, the company had introduced predictive maintenance algorithms that slashed fleet downtime by 30% and developed lightweight composite frames that boosted fuel efficiency across entire fleets. Each milestone had been a victory proof that his blend of technical insight and dogged perseverance would always shift the status quo. Today's setting, Parkside Motors was the pinnacle of automotive prestige, a cathedral of chrome and glass where luxury sedans and supercars glowed under soft spotlights. Its marble floors polished to a mirror finish, the dealership was more than a sales floor. It was a stage where the world's wealthiest drivers came to assert their status. Rolls-Royces idled beside Aston Martin's Lamborghinis, curved beneath arching ceilings, and a lone subscription-only hypercar perched on a rotating platform like a crown jewel. Charlie had chosen this venue with care. His modular cargo system was designed not just for everyday SUVs, but for the rarefied segment of discerning buyers who demanded both elegance and utility. He imagined silver-haired magnates stepping out of chauffeured limousines, curiosity lighting their eyes as he unlocked each module-integrated lights. Biometric locks, customizable interiors. Investors would nod approval. Journalists would scribble accolades. Photographers would capture the interplay of carbon fiber and chrome. But instead, on that polished forecourt, he'd been met with a barrier more rigid than any showroom door a valet's silent refusal. The valet, immaculately turned out in pressed whites and black slacks, had delivered his verdict without a hint of doubt, as if Charlie's very presence contradicted some unwritten rule. In Charles's 30-plus years on the planet, he had encountered microaggressions in boardrooms and lecture halls, but he'd seldom faced such brazen exclusion in a public space designed for commerce, for service. The irony stung here at the threshold of opportunity. He'd been rendered invisible. Yet as he stood amidst the humming lifts and hushed clanks of the service bay, that moment's pain had already transmuted into fuel. He surveyed the mechanics leaning in to watch him unpack the modules, their skepticism giving way to intrigue. It was in their quiet attention that he found reassurance. Technical curiosity always trumped bias eventually. He began his demonstration, the texture of his voice regaining its natural rhythm, confident, commanding, warm with the thrill of innovation. He lifted the first module and clicked it into place on the test frame, the latch popping into a perfect audible click. A mechanic stepped forward, eyes bright. "What's the load capacity?" he asked. Charlie's explanation came in crisp, assured waves. Up to 200 pounds of gear distributed across 5 compartments with real-time weight sensors and emergency override locks. The mechanic nodded, impressed. Others gathered close lifting compartments, testing the rails, noting the seamless fit. Meanwhile, on the periphery, Parkside senior managers huddled over tablets, reviewing Charlie's emails, the reservation confirmations. A hush rippled through the service bay as the regional director appeared, apology on her lips. She escorted Charlie back through the glass doors this time, with nods and murmured regrets. The doors whooshed open and Charlie's Escalade rolled in under the same spotlights that had moments ago shone on Lamborghinis. The audience of VIPs, journalists, investors, designers, exhaled relief and excitement mingling in the air. Inside the showroom's warm embrace, Charlie guided his guests from one module to the next. With each presentation, his narrative wove together technical detail and heartfelt vision. "I grew up watching my mother pack groceries into the trunk of our old sedan," he shared, voice softening. "I realized that behind every driver, there's a story: luggage for a family trip, tools for a small business owner. This system is about dignity, ensuring everyone's cargo moves with care and respect, no matter where they come from." The guests leaned in, drawn by his authenticity as much as by the hardware. As the last demonstration concluded, the general manager stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Thompson, on behalf of Parkside Motors, I apologize for the earlier confusion. Your system is extraordinary, and we're eager to partner with Sterling Dynamics." The handshake was firm, the apology genuine, an echo of the curbside denial now officially erased. Charlie smiled, but his mind raced ahead. This moment, born of bias and breakthrough, would set the stage for systemic change. He envisioned new protocols, inclusive client policies, bias awareness training for staff, equitable treatment guaranteed for every prospective customer. Sterling Dynamics would not simply sell its cargo modules. It would champion respect across every dealership floor in the country. As he climbed back into his Escalade to depart, the engine's steady rumble felt like an anthem. The dealership's marquee glowed behind him, but Charlie's eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the next problem to solve, the next barrier to break. In his rearview mirror, the service bay's lights flickered, reflecting a man who had taken a stand against prejudice and transformed a curbside slight into a stage for progress. And so in that seamless flow from rejection to recognition, Charlie Thompson's story illustrated a universal truth: when talent meets tenacity, even the sharpest edge of bias can be blunted. His journey from first-generation grad to global CEO, had been defined by innovation and resilience, and today, beneath the gleam of Parkside's showroom lights, it had been reaffirmed with conviction. Charlie stood on the polished marble threshold of Parkside Motors, the afternoon sun filtering through the arched glass doors in broad golden beams. He took a measured breath, squared his shoulders, and offered the attendant pristine white shirt. Brass nameplate his phone displaying the confirmation email thread. The invite to demonstrate Sterling Dynamics' flagship cargo modules had come directly from Parkside's regional director, Tim Harris. Charlie had even received a glossy engraved letter in the mail. Everything pointed to a seamless presentation, except now at this exact moment, policy had trumped proof. "Our floor can't handle SUVs," the attendant repeated, his arms folding across his chest like a barrier. Behind him on the showroom floor, sleek sedans and coupes gleamed beneath spotlights, their curves and chrome, a silent gallery mocking Charlie's exclusion. The contrast was cruel glass doors designed to welcome doors that refused him entry. 30 seconds passed, then 60. Each tick of the clock amplified the sting of injustice. Charlie unclipped his Sterling name badge and held it out. The receptionist had printed it herself. "Please," he said, voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "My appointment is at 1 o'clock. I'm right on time." His tone left no room for debate, yet the attendant remained unmoved. In the brief silence, Charlie's mind flickered to every boardroom he'd ever entered. There had been snubs disguised as courtesy nods that faltered when his skin tone came into focus. But never had he been so brazenly blocked. This felt personal, an affront not just to him but to every person of color who'd faced an invisible rope at life's milestones. A customer inside the showroom, a well-dressed woman with a sleek handbag, paused mid-stride and glanced back at him. Charlie caught her eye, offered a small acknowledging nod, and returned his attention to the attendant. Politeness, he reminded himself, was both armor and weapon. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm not here to argue policy. I'm here to demonstrate technology that could revolutionize your business. Please call your manager." The attendant's jaw tightened. He reached for his walkie-talkie. In that instant, Charlie knew he'd entered a moment that would define how people remembered him. He could blow up, storm off, leave prejudice unchallenged, or he could de-escalate with strategy. The attendant spoke into the walkie-kneed MGMT at front entrance. "Possible VIP issue." His clipped language betrayed unease. Charlie glanced to his side. One of the mechanics who had watched his earlier curbside setup drifted toward the entrance, curiosity written across his uniform. Charlie caught the mechanic's eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. Solidarity and silence. Moments later, Parkside's showroom manager emerged, sleek suit, polished hat in hand, her expression a mixture of apology and forced professionalism. "Mr. Thompson," she began, voice low. "I'm sorry for the confusion. Let me escort you to our demonstration bay. It's fully equipped for your needs." Charlie studied her, noting the slight tremor in her composure. The bias had been called out and now needed a graceful exit. He allowed himself a curt nod and followed her through a side door into a utilitarian service corridor. The corridor's fluorescent lights, flickered walls lined with oil-stained rags and spanners hung like forgotten trophies. It was a far cry from the showroom's sheen and glamour, but it would do. He wheeled his cargo modules down the hallway, the trolley's rubber wheels whispering over concrete. Each thud against the floor felt like a marker of progress bias confronted plan in motion. Still, as he packed the modules onto the bay's test frame, he let the audience inside, mechanics, service staff, even the attendant who'd barred him, see his mastery. His hands moved with precision, clicking rails into place, securing latches, calibrating sensors. He spoke in clear, confident tones. "These modules can handle up to 200 pounds, adjust to any make or model, and integrate seamlessly with your dealership's digital management system." The staff leaned in, skeptics transformed into engaged participants. Innovation, he reminded himself, was a universal language. Inside the bay, sunlight streamed through high windows, casting long rectangles of light on the floor. Charlie demonstrated the weight sensors, inviting a young technician to load gear. The tech placed a duffel bag in one compartment, and Charlie pointed to the dashboard screen where real-time weight metrics updated instantly. The tech's brow unfurled in surprise. Charlie let the moment linger. Proof trumped prejudice every time. Meanwhile, back at the entrance, Parkside senior executives had convened after the curbside incident. triggered an internal fire drill. Emails and texts pinged across the dealership's network. CEO of Sterling Dynamics denied entry needs statement. Regional director on his way. Charlie's composed shift from confrontation to demonstration had captured more than curiosity. It had captured accountability. Within those minutes, the dealership had pivoted from exclusion to engagement. As the final module powered up its sleek panels glowing softly under the bay lights, Charlie addressed the gathered staff and guests. His voice regained its natural cadence, authoritative, engaging, peppered with warm humor. I grew up watching my mother try to carry groceries in and out of our old sedan, he said, half smiling. I wanted a way to carry dignity and luggage into every trunk. His words landed like gentle punches, testaments to why this technology mattered beyond horsepower and payload. The assembled audience, mechanics, salespeople, investors, applauded the sound echoing off concrete walls. Charlie felt a surge of satisfaction. He'd turned a moment of blatant bias into an opportunity to showcase his expertise and vision. No longer was he the wronged outsider. He was the leader guiding them through the system he had crafted. Soon footsteps pounded in the corridor. The regional director strode in, flanked by the general manager. Their expressions blended respect and contrition. The director extended a hand to Charlie. "Charles," he said, "I apologize for the earlier mess. Let's get your setup on the showroom floor as planned." It was more than an apology, it was acknowledgement that the curbside refusal had been wrong. Charlie shook the director's hand, the weight of that gesture far heavier than the hardware he had unpacked. They led his Escalade back through the glass doors this time, with staff clearing the path. The showroom's ambient lighting bathed the scene in warmth. Charlie's SUV glided past rows of luxury sedans toward the designated demo spot. Cameras flashed, documenting the arrival that should have happened 15 minutes earlier. Once parked, Charlie hopped out, gathered his guests, and resumed the demonstration, now under the glare of showroom lights and the focused gaze of journalists. Press questions came rapid fire. How do you see this changing the dealership model? Is this scalable across smaller markets? Charlie answered each with unwavering confidence. Each response reinforced what the curbside snub had sought to deny: his authority, his expertise, his right to occupy that space. When the final question concluded, the general manager invited Charlie to address the dealership's entire staff. In front of a crowd gathered among gleaming chassis, Charlie spoke of respect. Every customer deserves dignity, and every product deserves its moment in the spotlight, regardless of the vehicle it's housed in. His words rippled through the room, a potent reminder that policy must serve people, not prejudice. As the crowd dispersed, Charlie packed away his modules, every click echoing with reclaimed pride. He loaded them back into the Escalade and paused in the driver's seat. The dealership's facade gleamed ahead, the glass doors reflecting afternoon light and the bustling activity within. He started the engine, the familiar purr, like a victory chord. Pulling out onto the street, Charlie glanced in the rearview mirror. Behind him, the dealership's illuminated sign shimmered, a beacon of opportunity and now acceptance. For those 15 minutes, he had been denied, redirected, and vindicated. But more than that, he had demonstrated that the strength of conviction and the power of preparation can dismantle prejudice one module at a time. In the rearview's reflection, he saw a man who had faced bias and refused to be diminished. And in that reflection lay the promise of every part yet to come. Charlie's pulse thrummed like a drumbeat against his ribs, but his voice remained controlled as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. He clicked the call icon for Tim Harris, Parkside Motors regional director, and held it to his ear. The valet's refusal still hung in the air, a sharp reminder of prejudice cloaked in policy. But Charlie wasn't here to lose his temper. He was here to reclaim his dignity and drive change. "Tim," he said, calm authority infusing each syllable. "I'm on site. My Escalade and I are scheduled for a demo in your showroom." There was a pause, the crackle of background noise. "Yet your team just told me the floor can't handle my vehicle. What's going on?" "Across town." Tim glanced up from his desk, eyes narrowing at his screen where Charlie's arrival time blinked in bold letters. He exhaled, pinning a crisp collar of regret. "Charlie, I'm so sorry. That's not what we agreed. Let me make this right. Hold tight. I'll handle it." Charlie set the phone aside. His gaze drifted across the forecourt where gleaming sedans and coupes, sat like statues polished to perfection. The sun's reflection gleamed off their windshields, an unspoken gallery of wealth, and in contrast, his Escalade, no less luxurious, was treated as an intruder. Yet in that moment, the valet's body language betrayed uncertainty, a slight lean, a quick glance toward the service corridor. Charlie recognized the subtle shift. The standoff between prejudice and preparedness was tipping. Moments passed as Charlie watched valet attendants whisper among themselves. He took a breath, letting the noise of idle engines and distant conversation recede. The engine of his Escalade hummed beneath him, a steady reminder of the machine's power, and by extension, his own. This was no mere vehicle dispute. It was a stand against the assumptions that sought to marginalize him. He closed his eyes briefly, summoning the calm that had carried him through countless boardrooms and investor pitches. Anger might have scorched the moment, but composure would win the day. He retrieved his phone again and sent a brief text to his general counsel. "Document everything. We may need it." Then another to his PR director. "Hold for statement." His fingers tapped the screen with the same deliberation he applied to each business decision. Charlie understood the optics. Every gesture, every word, every lingering glance would be scrutinized. He would not allow this moment of injustice to define him. He would define it. Tim's return call arrived just as a senior manager approached Tim himself, hurrying across the showroom forecourt, tie-loosened face earnest. "Charles, I can't apologize enough," he began, voice pitched with urgency. "Our valet misunderstood the instructions. We'll clear the floor right now." His words raced ahead, but Charlie held up a hand, a gesture of calm before storm. "I appreciate that, Tim." Charlie replied, voice even. "But I've been here for 15 minutes. I'd like to move forward now." He ended the call and swung the door open, stepping onto the pavement with serene determination. The manager nodded and signaled to the valet staff, who hurried to usher other vehicles away. As the last sedan rolled back, shafts of sunlight cut through the now empty display area. Parkside Motors' shining floor was once again open for business. Charlie waved his guests forward, two design journalists, a venture partner, and a longtime friend from his company's board, each with cameras and notebooks ready. He led them past the rotating platform, holding a hypercar toward the center of the forecourt where his Escalade waited. The air felt electric anticipation rising as engines idled and cameras adjusted. In that charged atmosphere, Charlie exuded presence, tall, impeccably dressed eyes, bright with purpose. He crossed to the rear of the SUV and released the hatch. The hydraulic arm greeted him with a soft hiss, revealing the precisely stowed cargo modules. Charlie's fingers traced the carbon fiber edges, feeling the seamless craftsmanship he'd overseen. He unlocked the first module, sliding it free in one fluid motion. The mechanism's click resonated like a verdict prejudice undone by proficiency. His guests clustered around, their attention rapt. A journalist raised her phone. "Mr. Thompson, can you walk us through the system?" Charlie turned, shoulders squared, and began his demonstration. His tone was warm but authoritative, each sentence measured to convey both expertise and conviction. "This module secures up to 200 pounds of gear," he said, "with integrated weight sensors and biometric locking. It's designed for clients who demand both elegance and reliability." A venture partner nodded thoughtfully, eyes flicking between Charlie's confident expression and the sleek hardware. "What about compatibility with other models?" he asked. Charlie smiled, inviting the gentleman to test a second module. "These units ship with adjustable mounts," he explained, guiding his hand along a telescoping rail. "They adapt to ground clearance and width, ensuring a perfect fit on SUVs, crossovers, even pickup trucks." As mechanics and staff gathered to observe, Charlie guided them through load tests, placing bags, tools, and electronics into compartments, while explaining real-world scenarios, family road trips, executive travel gear, mobile workstations for remote teams. With each example, he emphasized dignity, how every person, regardless of their vehicle, deserves secure, respectful transport of their belongings. The sunlight shifted as clouds drifted across the sky, casting moving shadows across the polished forecourt. Charlie seized the moment, his voice raising slightly in triumph. "When I first pitched this concept, investors asked why this mattered. I told them behind every SUV is a story, someone's livelihood, someone's hope, someone's dignity. That's what we protect. His words hung in the air, the gravity of experience underpinning every phrase. Behind him, Parkside's regional director watched, arms folded thoughtfully, as the curbside denial transformed into an arena for admiration. The juxtaposition was unmistakable. 15 minutes ago, prejudice had barred Charlie's entry. Now his brilliance commanded undivided attention. The dealership's senior management, previously flustered, now nodded in appreciation, exchanging discreet apologies. Charlie wrapped up the demonstration by securing the final module and lowering the hatch. He turned to face his guests, voice steady and sincere. "Thank you all for your patience and interest," he said. "I hope this solves real problems for your clients and sets a new standard for vehicle accessories." The assembled group responded with applause, some tentative at first, then growing warmer as they recognized the fairness of his appeal. With the demonstration concluded, Tim Harris approached again, extending his hand. "Charles, I can't tell you how impressed I am. I apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. We'd be honored to partner with Sterling Dynamics." Charlie clasped his hand, firmly nodding. "Tim, partnerships are built on trust and respect. Let's move forward together with that in mind." As they spoke, the showroom staff quietly readjusted vehicles and cleared pathways, ensuring the Escalade's departure would be as smooth as its arrival should have been. Charlie paused in the driver's seat, looking out at the dealership's sparkling facade. The afternoon sun danced across the glass, and for the first time Charlie saw the place not as a barrier but as a stage for breakthrough. He started the engine, the deep rumble, a triumphant chord. His guests settled into the front seats, smiles of satisfaction on their faces. Charlie put the SUV into gear and rolled forward, gliding past rows of polished luxury cars. The doors opened automatically, acknowledging the vehicle's rightful place on the floor. Cameras flashed from behind the glass, capturing the moment of clearance, evidence that once again prejudice had been met with composure and countered with capability. As he drove away, the dealership's sign receded in his rearview mirror, but its impact lingered. He'd arrived as an outsider, confronted bias with calm authority, and reclaimed his narrative through expertise and resolve. The journey from curb to showroom had been more than a short drive. It was a microcosm of every obstacle he'd faced and overcome in his ascent from first-generation college student to global CEO. Charlie exhaled a satisfied grin, tugging at his lips. His pulse slowed, the thunder in his chest quieting to a steady rhythm. He had chosen measured challenge over rash anger, and the outcome spoke for itself. In the rearview mirror, the sunlit dealership gleamed, a place he had once been barred from, but now left as an ally redeemed. And as he merged onto the boulevard, Charlie knew that every part of this story, the prejudice, the perseverance, the composed challenge, would resonate far beyond Parkside Motors, inspiring others to confront bias with both grace and grit. His investors sat inside the vehicle, their faces visible through the windshield, anticipation mixed with frustration. They'd flown in to witness his cargo system in action, to see the market potential unfold before them. Now the minutes ticked away. Demonstration rooms meticulously prepared with lit platforms, and camera crews stood empty, the promise of innovation paused by a single policy excuse. "Our floor can't bear SUVs," the valet had repeated, arms pistons of finality. Charlie's mind cataloged each moment of delay as a test of endurance and principle. "Mr. Thompson," came a tentative voice from the service bay entrance. The regional director, Tim Harris, had joined the fray, clipboard in hand, brow furrowed. He approached swiftly, clearly unsettled. "Charlie, I'm sorry these guys were following an outdated memo. We'll sort it out right now." His apology hung in the air, sincere but insufficient against the clock's relentless march. Charlie nodded curtly. He knew Tim meant well, but well-meaning mantras couldn't override entrenched prejudice. Beside him, the valet lowered his chin and glanced toward the showroom's senior management office. Furtive glances passed between staffers as whispers escalated into low hums of speculation. "Is that really Sterling Dynamics, CEO? I heard they're worth $1 billion. Why won't they just move the demo to the back?" Each snippet stung more than the last, revealing the gulf between reputation and reception. Charlie squared his jaw. He understood that rights weren't granted by policy, they were claimed by resolve. He took a slow breath, lifting his phone to voice record everything. Every denial, every hesitant apology, every pantomime of confusion would become part of the dossier he'd compile later. The device's screen glowed, capturing audio of the attendant's second explanation. It's a liability issue. If your SUV tips or damages the floor, we're liable. Charlie tapped his temple, the gesture both sardonic and strategic. Liability, he mused silently, or bias disguised as logistics. Tim, flanked by two managers, huddled. Their shoulders tense, they scanned tablet screens and exchanged hurried text messages. The dealership's head of operations emerged. Briefly, shook his head in disbelief at the valet, then ducked back behind tinted glass. Their collective anxiety was palpable. A muscle twitch in one attendant's jaw spoke volumes. They knew Charlie's patience was finite. Across the forecourt, a design journalist, her notebook peeking from a leather portfolio, stepped forward, lens trained on Charlie. He caught her eye and offered a curt nod. Her pen moved, scribbling observations that would be published by morning. He was keenly aware that every gesture, every word would frame his narrative in the public eye. The power of optics was as important as the substance of his demonstration. Inside the Escalade, an investor tapped on the dashboard. "Charlie," he called softly through the tinted glass. "What's the holdup?" Charlie met his gaze through the rearview mirror. The investor's question carried both concern and expectation. Charlie exhaled, his own pulse thrumming. "I'm on it," he mouthed. Confidence was currency. He refused to let doubt taint their outlook. He switched tactics. Moving with deliberate calm, he walked to the valet stand and asked, voice raised just enough to carry, "Is there a fire marshal I can speak to?" The attendant blinked, taken aback. No, sir." "There isn't." Charlie's tone sharpened. "Then let's bring your structural engineer. I want floor load specs." The attendant's eyes flickered to Tim, who winced. The absurdity of the claim was laid bare. No SUV had ever crashed through a showroom floor. Yet here, policy masked prejudice. A hush fell. Onlookers shifted their weight. Even the humming of showroom music felt discordant. Charlie moved to the service bay entrance, gestured for his guest to follow. "We'll demonstrate there first," he said crisply, reclaiming momentum. The path was narrower than the showroom aisle, the lighting harsher, the air tinged with industrial scent. Yet nobody objected. Prejudice could not follow him beyond the threshold. Inside, under the fluorescent glare, Charlie unpacked the cargo modules with renewed purpose. Each metallic click of the latches. Each calibrated sensor reading resonated like a statement. Expertise transcends exclusion. Mechanics gathered closer, leaving behind the showroom's polished distance. He could feel their respect replacing judgment as he guided them through tests, weight distribution, lock mechanisms, emergency release functions. With each successful demonstration, the shackles of bias loosened. Outside the showroom, staff watched through the glass partition, their initial skepticism melting into reluctant admiration. A manager cleared his throat and stepped in. "Charlie," he said, voice strained, "I've reviewed the floor specs. We can handle your Escalade after all." The words came belatedly, born of technical verification rather than sincerity. Charlie paused, considering. He could seize immediate triumph or demand a clear acknowledgement. He chose both. Looking up at the manager, he let the warehouse's noise recede, allowing his voice to carry. "I appreciate the confirmation, but what I need now is commitment that clients like me will never be turned away based on size or color. Not tomorrow, not next month." His statement resonated through the bay, each word measured to convey authority and warmth. "If you stand by that, I'll return to the floor, and we'll finish the demo where it belongs." The manager offered a nod, unease and respect flickering in his eyes. "Agreed." He stepped back, signaling to the valet to clear the showroom once more. Doors slid open, light spilled into the corridor, and the glint of chrome returned to the forecourt. This time, there were no policy excuses hiding behind protocol. Charlie's composed challenge had exposed the true barrier and forced it to fall. As he crossed the threshold to reclaim the showroom floor, the atmosphere shifted. The echoes of skepticism were replaced by quiet cheers. Staff murmurs acknowledging that bias had met its match in calm confidence. Charlie's investors emerged from the Escalade notebooks and cameras, ready eyes alight with renewed anticipation. The demonstration rooms, once cold and empty, now warmed with the promise of progress. In that moment, the curbside confrontation had achieved its purpose. Prejudice had been called out, Patience had been tested and power had been asserted with unwavering composure. The stage was set for the next act where Charlie would seize the showroom floor and turn a moment of exclusion into a landmark of inclusion. His pulse steadied, his gaze firm. He prepared to guide his audience into the final demonstration where innovation would outshine bias entirely. Charlie's watch read 10 minutes past his arrival when he decided it was time for Plan B. The sun had shifted, casting long guards across the polished forecourt, but the air still crackled with the tension of stalled progress. Investors tapped their fingers against glossy notebooks in the back seat of the Escalade. Mechanics in the service bay paused mid-screwdriver twist. Even the valet, once so confident, now shifted uncomfortably, as if feeling the first tremors of a shifting power. Charlie reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen for a heartbeat before he tapped out a message to his general counsel document. Every conversation, every excuse. We'll need timestamps and audio. Secure all walkie-talkie logs. He hit send. Immediately an acknowledgement pinged back on it. Next, he slid over to his PR lead's chat fingers flying across the glass. Stand by for statement bias caught on camera. Media alert if unresolved. A quick emoji, an unfolding newspaper sealed the directive. Finally, he flicked a discreet message to the design journalist filming from the sidelines, cameras rolling. Be ready for live cut. These simple digital breadcrumbs marked the beginning of the end for the curbside farce. Charlie set the phone down on the SUV's center console and stepped out once more, each footfall deliberate. He crossed the short distance to where the valet stood, posture stiff. With a calm that belied the electric undercurrent, he looked the attendant in the eye and said, "Hold all other appointments for 10 minutes. There was no question in his tone, only the unassailable authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. The valet's lips parted, uncertain. He glanced up at the showroom's senior staff, blinking back at him through the glass. Then, with a stuttered nod, he relayed the order over his walkie-talkie. In that instant, the dynamic shifted. No longer was Charlie the supplicant begging for entry. He had become arbiter of time. The valet, once gatekeeper, now served at Charlie's command. The silent audience, mechanics, investors, journalists leaned in, recognizing the subtle but transformative moment. Prejudice was no longer behind the wheel. Charlie turned to face his guests, voice soft but resonant. "Thank you for your patience," he said, a slight knowing smile warming his expression. "We'll proceed shortly." His investors exchanged impressed glances. Their earlier impatience dissolved into respect. Even the most skeptical mechanic gave an approving nod. The tension that had coiled like a spring began to unwind, replaced by a quiet expectation of what was to come. He walked back to the front of the Escalade and surveyed the polished expanse of showroom real estate through the glass. The demonstration lights glimmered like distant stars waiting for the show to begin. Charlie's fingers absently traced the carbon fiber weave of one cargo module, a tactile reminder of the stakes. This was more than a product launch. It was a stand against bias, a testament to his belief that innovation should open doors, not be shut out by fear or prejudice. Over his shoulder, the valet's radio crackled standby on all floors. No vehicles in until further notice. The words hung in the air, as dramatic as any pronouncement in a court of law. Charlie's phone buzzed again, a text from his counsel with the first batch of recordings, crisp audio of the attendance policy protests, snippets of manager apologies. He scrolled quickly, satisfied. Evidence was piling up. Charlie pivoted, turning back to his guests. The attending journalist lifted her camera lens, focusing on his composed figure. The click-click of her shutter felt like the beat of a drum summoning a reckoning. Charlie looked directly into the lens, as if acknowledging the role this moment would play in the public narrative. His eyes shone with resolve, the same resolute spark that had fueled Sterling Dynamics' rise. Behind him, the service bay doors wheezed open, mechanics stepping out to watch the spectacle. They leaned on heavy equipment arms, crossed eyes flickering between Charlie and the showroom beyond. The air smelled of motor oil and fresh rubber, mundane details that contrasted sharply with the high-stakes drama unfolding. Charlie's demonstration modules remained locked in the rear hatch, a silent promise of what would soon be unleashed. His phone buzzed a final time, a notification from the PR lead. "All systems ready. Social going live on your cue." Charlie tapped a thumbs-up emoji in return. It felt almost celebratory, a small victory dance before the main event. He pocketed the phone and turned back to the gathered staff voice carrying across the pavement. "Thank you all for waiting. Let's make this demonstration unforgettable." At that cue, the valet and a trio of attendants moved swiftly to clear the showroom forecourt. Other vehicles rolled back, engines sputtering, leaving a clear path to the central demo area. Lights above the polished floor blinked into readiness, and the restaurant's mirrored facade reflected the sky's pale blue. Charlie watched, arms folded, as opportunity beckoned. He strode forward, each step reclaiming ground lost to bias moments before. The automatic doors slid apart in silent welcome. Charlie stepped inside, head held high, and paused mid-threshold. In that pregnant beat, time seemed to slow. The silence of the showroom enveloped him, broken only by the soft hum of climate control and the distant murmur of staff. He turned, offering his audience a concise nod of gratitude for their perseverance. Then he made his way to the spot where his Escalade should have been 15 minutes earlier. His SUV rolled in carefully, guided by an attendant whose earlier certainty had now given way to deference. Journals and cameras followed, capturing every inch of movement. Charlie stepped out again under the showroom's warm glow. The transition from curbside rejection to stage-worthy entrance was more than logistical. It was symbolic. This floor, once forbidden, now belonged to him. He walked around the vehicle, inspecting the clean lines and bespoke cargo attachments. Guests gathered close, crowding in to catch every detail. The CEO of Sterling Dynamics took a breath, savoring the return of momentum. He gestured to the rear hatch. "Let's get started," he said, voice measured yet infused with excitement. As mechanics assembled behind him and the spotlight's beam found its center, Charlie felt the electric thrill of the impending reveal. The elevator music that had once played softly in the background faded, replaced by the faint thrum of cameras and murmured anticipation. In the 10 minutes since Plan B had sprung to life, he had seized control through strategy, technology, and the quiet power of evidence. Prejudice had been exposed, policy had been tested, and now the demonstration would speak louder than any excuse. He placed a hand on the carbon fiber latch and clicked it open. The mechanism yielded with a precise whisper, unfolding the first module like a bloom in spring. Cameras flashed, and Charlie guided curious hands to test the integrity of latches, the resilience of sensors. He narrated each step with clarity and confidence. "Here you see the real-time load gauge, up to 200 pounds per compartment, adjustable in milliseconds, and the biometric lock ensures only authorized users gain access." The demonstration unfolded seamlessly, the product's performance undeniable. As each module slid into place, the past 15 minutes of friction melted away. The gloss of the showroom floor now felt like an accolade, not a barrier. Charlie's voice rose and fell with the cadence of a storyteller, at his peak dramatic, convincing, unwavering. Behind the scenes, Tim Harris exhaled in relief. Parkside senior management exchanged subdued grins mentally, noting the flawless execution. The design journalist's photos and footage would soon circulate, framing Charlie's triumph as a lesson in leadership and perseverance. The power dynamic, once skewed by bias, had been irrevocably leveled by preparation and presence. By the time the demo concluded, applause echoed through the showroom. Charlie locked the final module, its click resonant with finality. He turned, meeting the cheers with a humble nod. Investors slid forward to shake his hand, mechanics patted his back. Charlie surveyed the scene, satisfaction warming his chest. Bias had been challenged, and the demonstration had woven innovation and justice into one seamless narrative. As he prepared to depart, Charlie stepped back into the driver's seat of his Escalade, the engine's low rumble a fitting coda. His pulse had returned to a steady rhythm, his confidence unshaken. The dealership's lights shimmered behind him as he pulled away, leaving the gleaming floor to reflect a man who refused to be denied. In those 10 critical minutes, he had orchestrated a turnaround that would echo far beyond Parkside Motors, a testament to the transformative power of strategy, resilience, and the unwavering demand for respect. Charlie's watch ticked over to exactly 15 minutes since he pulled onto the forecourt of Parkside Motors, and the moment he had orchestrated arrived with cinematic precision. He stepped out of his Escalade, flanked by two figures in charcoal suits, his general counsel Anna Patel, and a discreet film crew whose cameras and sound equipment had been staged behind the service bay. The assembled staff and onlookers paused mid-conversation, sensing the crescendo in the day's drama. The valet who'd first barred him stared mouth agape as Charlie's side door swung closed behind him. The polished showroom lights reflected off Anna's briefcase, and the camera lenses casting pinpricks of illumination across the polished marble. Charlie walked slowly, each measured step amplifying anticipation. The valet swallowed, clearing his throat. Mr. Thompson. Please proceed, he stammered, voice thin with astonishment. His earlier certainty had evaporated. Authority had shifted. At Charlie's nod, the valet backed away and flicked a remote. The glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh, as if the building itself acquiesced to justice. A hush settled, broken only by the gentle hum of climate control before the facility's staff sprang into motion. Salespeople and technicians, previously clustered in small groups, scattered to clear a path. Their polished shoes whispered against the marble as they moved with choreographed precision, creating a corridor of silent respect. Every one of them knew this scene would be remembered. Charlie's Escalade rolled forward, its deep rumble filling the cavernous space. The showroom lights gleamed against its sleek black paint, highlighting the custom cargo attachments he'd designed. Cameras tilted, capturing low-angle shots that draped the vehicle in cinematic grandeur. Anna walked alongside the driver's side, her composed presence signaling that this was no ordinary entrance, it was a reclaiming of space. As the SUV halted in the center of the showroom, a small team of technicians approached. They opened the rear hatch, revealing the modular cargo system locked into place and ready for showtime. With practiced efficiency, they unlatched the first module and slid it free, its carbon fiber panels gleaming under the spotlights. An audible click reverberated through the show floor like a gavel, striking a bench verdict rendered. A ripple of applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing in volume. It started with a handful of mechanics leaning against service lifts, then spread to the assembled journalists, investors, and even the valet whose earlier defiance had given way to wonder. Charlie stepped forward, offering a nod of acknowledgement and gratitude. The applause crescendoed and then subsided into appreciative murmurs as he guided the technicians to unload the remaining modules. At that moment, the general manager of Parkside Motors emerged from her office, her posture apologetic yet dignified. She swept an arm toward Charlie, her voice calm but carrying the weight of genuine contrition. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, eyes fixed on Charlie on behalf of Parkside Motors. "I offer my deepest apology to Mr. Charles Thompson. Our initial refusal was not only an affront to him, but a failure of our commitment to welcome every client equally. We are truly sorry." Her words landed like a balm on the stunned audience. The manager paused, drawing in a steadying breath, then added, "We are implementing immediate training for all staff and revising our entry protocols to ensure this never happens again. Mr. Thompson, thank you for your patience and for holding us to a higher standard." A hush fell as the sincerity of her apology resonated, the subtle tremor in her voice, underscoring the gravity of her mistake. Charlie inclined his head, accepting the apology. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Thank you," he replied, voice measured with warmth and authority. "What matters now is not just saying sorry, but ensuring real change." His handshake with the manager was firm, a symbolic alliance forged in the crucible of conflict and resolution. With that, Charlie turned back to his demonstration. He touched the edge of the first module and with a slight gesture invited the assembled crowd to join him. Hands tentatively reached out to feel the smooth, reinforced surfaces. Phones snapped photos and recorded video. The atmosphere shifted from tension to celebration. As each module came off the trolley and snapped into the display rig, Charlie narrated its features with the confidence of a man who had navigated storms and emerged stronger. "This system," he said, voice carrying easily across the showroom's expanse, offers secure transport for professional gear, personal belongings, and everything in between. It adapts to any make or model, and with biometric locks, your cargo travels with your identity, not your fear." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Today's demonstration is proof that dedication to innovation must be matched by dedication to dignity. The audience responded with renewed energy. Investors scribbled notes about market potential. Journalists whispered about the story's arc. Technicians nodded, appreciating the design's elegance. Even the sales staff, once caught in their own missteps, now beamed at the prospect of offering this system to clients. Charlie moved with fluid grace, fielding questions, guiding hands, and weaving his personal journey into the narrative, from garage tinkerer to CEO, from overlooked outsider to celebrated visionary. As the final module clicked into place, applause surged again, filling the showroom with the sound of vindication. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment when prejudice had been confronted and performance had triumphed. Charlie allowed himself a brief smile, not of triumph over individuals, but triumph of principle. He inhaled deeply, the echo of the public apology still vibrant in his ears. Then, as if on cue, the showroom's audio system flickered to life, playing a soft, triumphant chord, a deliberate choice by his PR team to underscore the narrative's arc. The melody wrapped around the applause, reinforcing the story's emotional high point. Charlie looked out at the sea of faces, each reflecting a different shade of reaction, some relieved, some inspired, all attentive. He raised a hand, calling the room to a hush. "Thank you," he said simply. His voice, now warm, carried genuine gratitude. "Thank you for witnessing this moment. Let's ensure that every dealership, every showroom, every customer interaction honors the respect we all deserve." His words lingered, a call to action woven into the fabric of the day's triumph. When he finally stepped away from the display, the general manager flanked him, and together they stood before the crowd, symbols of conflict resolved and futures aligned. A soft chorus of approval followed them as they shook hands once more, sealing a new partnership built on respect and innovation. Charlie's counsel and the film crew melted back into the sidelines, their presence no longer central but instrumental in capturing the moment's authenticity. The valet, now beaming, offered Charlie's guests escort service into the rest of the showroom as though to underscore the dealership's renewed commitment. As Charlie returned to his Escalade, the midday sunlight streaming through the glass facade turned the vehicle's surface into a living tapestry of light and shadow. He opened the hatch one last time to secure the demonstration modules, each click a quiet testament to the journey from prejudice to parity. The final seal snapped into place, and he closed the hatch with a satisfied nod. Sliding into the driver's seat, Charlie allowed the engine's steady rumble to fill the silence, a fitting coda to the day's performance. He glanced to the side window where the manager and his counsel exchanged warm smiles. Outside, the valet held the door, anticipation dancing in his eyes. Charlie met his gaze in the reflection, offering a nod of mutual respect. As the door slid open and the SUV glided forward, the cameras captured one final shot. The Escalade rolling toward the exit, its polished wheels tracing a path from conflict to resolution. The glass doors closed behind him with a soft whisper, sealing the story's climactic twist in Parkside Motors' history. Justice served swift, tasted of reclaimed dignity and possibility. And as Charlie pulled onto the boulevard, the late afternoon sun falling across the city's skyline, he carried with him more than a successful demonstration. He carried the victory of principle over prejudice, a triumph that would echo across every showroom he would ever enter. Charlie drove away from Parkside Motors just as the afternoon light began to soften, but back at the dealership, the ripple effects of his decisive stand were already transforming policy and public perception. It was barely an hour later when the dealership's official social media channels lit up with a message that echoed around every feed in the city. Parkside Motors apologizes unreservedly to Mr. Charles Thompson and to any customer who may have felt unwelcome. Effective immediately, our vehicle entry policy is updated. All clients, all models, no exceptions. The simple three-point statement, apology policy, revision, inclusivity guarantee, appeared on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, accompanied by a polished photo of Charles Thompson shaking the hand of Parkside's general manager in the brightly lit showroom. By the time Charlie's Escalade had merged onto the boulevard, the post had already been shared and commented on hundreds of times. Positive reactions swelled, and Parkside's apology, pinned at the top of their profile, felt like a lighthouse cutting through a storm of past missteps. But the apology wasn't the entire story. Alongside the policy update, Parkside Motors announced their enrollment in Sterling Dynamics' newly launched Bias Awareness and Inclusion program. The press release, crafted with careful deference to Charlie's contributions, explained that every staff member from valets to sales executives would undergo comprehensive training within the next 30 days. The program's outline promised modules on unconscious bias, customer service equity, and scenario-based workshops where employees would role-play real-life interactions under the guidance of Sterling Dynamics trained facilitators. As the dealership's communications director, Verity Clark, drafted follow-up posts to explain the program, she was conscious that Parkside's reputation hinged now on follow-through. We are committed not just to words, but to demonstrable change. Read one line echoing Charlie's own insistence that apologies without action were hollow. Within minutes, Clark received notifications that local community groups and professional associations had expressed interest in auditing Parkside's training protocols. Proof that the dealership's commitment had ignited a broader conversation about industry-wide standards. Meanwhile, local news outlets seized on the story with fervor. The evening broadcast on Channel 7 began with footage of Charlie's 15-minute standoff and triumphant entry, followed by clips of the apology announcement. The anchor's tone was admiring. What began as a shocking act of bias ended in a masterclass in accountability, she declared before cutting to an interview with an automotive industry analyst. The analyst described Charlie's composed challenge as a blueprint for modern leadership, turning a moment of prejudice into a platform for systemic improvement. She emphasized that Parkside's swift policy overhaul and investment in bias training reflected the kind of corporate responsibility that customers increasingly demand. Digital news platforms ran headlines such as CEO's curbside confrontation spurs, major dealership reforms, and from prejudice to policy, how one man's resolve changed Parkside Motors. Opinion columns picked up the thread, a respected business columnist wrote. In an era where brand loyalty hinges on ethical conduct, Charlie Thompson showed the world that respect isn't granted, it's earned, protected, and defended. Another editorial penned by a civil rights advocate praised Sterling Dynamics' bias awareness curriculum as an example of how private sector collaboration can drive social change. Online metrics told a compelling story. Parkside Motors' website traffic spiked by 200% as curious visitors examined the newly posted policies. Phone lines lit up with calls from clients asking, "Does this apply to me?" The dealership's booking calendar, which had shown a slight dip in the wake of the curbside incident, shot back up, with many citing the apology and training program as reasons to return or to visit for the first time. Verity checked the real-time analytics bookings were up 30% compared to the previous week, and Net Promoter Scores had climbed to an all-time high. Public trust, it seemed, could be restored and even strengthened when businesses listened and adapted. At Sterling Dynamics headquarters that evening, the news of Parkside's embrace of the bias awareness program was met with enthusiasm. Charlie convened a video call with Anna Patel, his general counsel, and Marisol Diaz, his PR director. On screen, the smiling faces of Parkside's leadership appeared alongside their own. They discussed logistics, training schedules, workshop venues, facilitator assignments. Charlie made sure the deal was more than symbolic. He insisted on quarterly progress reports open to public scrutiny. Transparency is key, he reminded them. If we're going to hold others accountable, we must hold ourselves to the same standard. Just as important, Charlie wanted to amplify the positive outcomes. He authorized a series of case study videos highlighting early successes. A short clip showed valets practicing respectful greetings. Another detailed how sales staff role-played complex guest scenarios. A third featured team leaders discussing how the training reshaped their approach to customer service. These clips populated Parkside's and Sterling Dynamics' digital channels, reminding both companies' broader audiences that accountability was an ongoing journey, not a one-off event. Experts in organizational behavior stepped forward to comment. A professor of business ethics at a nearby university noted, "Most companies tiptoe around bias issues, but Parkside's swift embrace of reform, driven by Charlie's stand, demonstrates how decisive leadership can catalyze meaningful change. It's a case study in the integration of justice and profitability." Similarly, a consumer rights watchdog praised the directness of the policy update, saying, "When a company declares all clients any model, it breaks down barriers that too often go unrecognized. That level of clarity sets a new standard." On social media, customers shared their own experiences at Parkside before and after the policy shift. One user posted, "I went to Parkside last year and felt like they didn't care about my older Jeep. Now they greeted me warmly and helped with my custom roof rack." People change. Another commented, "I was hesitant after seeing that video, but I returned today and was blown away by the new training worth every penny." These testimonials, authentic and grassroots, wove a compelling tapestry of before and after reality that no corporate press release could match. By late evening, a local business journal had published a feature story with the headline, "From Exclusion to Inclusion, How Sterling Dynamics and Parkside Motors Rewrote the Rules." The piece detailed the timeline of events, the policy overhauls, and the training rollout, synthesizing the lessons learned. It identified three key takeaways: swift response leads to credibility, collaboration yields lasting solutions, and visibility. Fosters accountability lessons any company could apply. As the night deepened, Charlie reflected on the day's whirlwind from his home office balcony. The city lights shimmered like promises in the distance. He thought about the myriad customers who would now walk into Parkside Motors without fear of prejudice, about the staff who would approach each guest with newfound awareness, and about the subtle shift in culture his actions had initiated. He thought of the broader industry where other dealerships might now watch and learn, where a single act of bias could no longer stand unchallenged. He slid his phone out once more to review the day's metric social engagement counts. Booking upticks signed training agreements. Satisfaction swelled not as a fleeting victory, but as the seed of enduring transformation. He drafted a brief thank you note to Parkside's leadership and another to the first community group that had offered to audit their training program. Then, satisfied that accountability was on track, he closed his laptop. In the hush of the evening, Charlie allowed himself a moment of quiet pride, not for the applause or the headlines, but for the knowledge that justice, when pursued with composure and conviction, could reshape policies and restore trust. The chapters of prejudice and perseverance had converged, giving way to a narrative of inclusion and progress. And while the aftershocks of that day would reverberate across boardrooms, newsrooms, and social feeds, the real triumph lay in the simple fact that at Parkside Motors, every client and every vehicle had earned its right to shine on the showroom floor. Charlie stepped away from the polished showroom floor that had become the stage for his stand against bias and settled into a quiet corner of the dealership lounge. The day's sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the leather chairs and hushed conversations around him. He allowed himself a moment to absorb how far the story had traveled in less than 24 hours, from the curbstone where he'd first been denied entry to the gleaming heart of Parkside Motors, where his prototype cargo system finally took center stage. He opened his phone and tapped through a handful of messages, notes of gratitude from staff who'd witnessed the transformation, screenshots of social media feeds buzzing with support, and email forwards of news articles lauding the swift policy overhaul. Each message reinforced a simple truth he'd long held: dignity delayed is dignity denied. And the only path to real respect is decisive, unhesitating action. Standing to face a small handheld camera set up on a tripod, Charlie allowed the room's ambient hush to settle. He cleared his throat, the only sound beside the faint click of the dealership's automatic doors operating in the background. Then, with measured confidence, he began to speak directly to those who'd followed this journey from the very first moment. We've seen how a single no can echo like a wall in a person's life, he said, voice steady yet warm. He ran a hand through his hair, a subtle gesture of connection rather than performance. This afternoon, that no became a catalyst for yes, yes to progress, yes to accountability, and yes to a higher standard of respect for every individual who walks through those doors regardless of the vehicle they drive. Charlie paused, letting his words penetrate. He imagined the countless viewers, seasoned professionals, retirees, who remembered earlier battles for equality. Younger leaders just beginning their careers absorbing that sentiment. It wasn't merely a corporate address. It was an invitation for every person listening to consider the small indignities they'd accepted as routine. When I first arrived, he continued, I thought this was just about a payload system or a product demo. But it became so much more. He leaned slightly toward the camera as if confiding in a friend. It became about how we treat one another in every moment of contact. Because whether in a dealership lobby, a boardroom, or a family gathering, when we allow prejudice, even in its most subtle form, we diminish ourselves as well as the person before us. His gaze drifted to the far wall where a banner still hung. All clients welcome any model. The words, once merely text on a page, had taken on profound meaning. Now they stood as a beacon for every business, every institution to emulate. Charlie turned back to the lens, voice confident and inviting. I want to know from you, what unfair barrier have you faced? Maybe it was the assumption that you didn't belong, or the idea that your story didn't matter. Whatever it was, share it below. Let your experience become part of the collective call for change. He relaxed into his chair, the leather cushion embracing him like a well-worn ally. "Hit that like button," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "If you believe that justice shouldn't wait for anyone. And if you're new here, welcome. Subscribe to join us for more stories where power is reclaimed and dignity is restored." His tone carried the conviction of someone who knew that engagement wasn't just about numbers, but about building a community committed to fairness. Charlie placed a hand over his heart, the gesture sincere and grounded. "This isn't the end of our story. It's the beginning of a larger conversation about how every person, regardless of background or vehicle choice, deserves respect and an even playing field." He paused, eyes softening as he considered the path forward. "Use your voice not just here but everywhere you go. Speak up when you see bias. Lift up those whose dignity is threatened. Because every moment we stay silent, we make room for injustice to thrive." He sat back, letting the weight of his own words settle. Behind him, a few staff members drifted into the room, veritable witnesses to his transformation of Parkside Motors, and eager to hear his final thoughts. Charlie nodded to them, acknowledging their role in the gesture of change. He turned again to the camera, his final appeal resonant and unhurried. "Remember, change happens when we refuse to accept the status quo. It happens when we pair courage with calm intelligence, with integrity, and when we stand not just for ourselves, but for everyone who deserves an equal chance." He reached out, switching off the camera with a deliberate press, as if formally closing a chapter. The red recording light vanished, leaving him in the soft glow of the lounge's ambient lights. Charlie took a deep breath and stood smoothing his jacket. He offered a gracious nod to the small audience, now assembled employees, journalists, partners, all of whom had played a part in today's narrative. Walking toward the showroom doors, Charlie reflected on the ripple he'd set in motion. The banner above those doors, once a symbol of policy, had become a promise. He thought of the dozens of dealerships and businesses now watching Parkside Motors' example and preparing their own responses. More importantly, he considered the individuals whose confidence had been uplifted by his stand, a family loading groceries into a car, an entrepreneur trusting the system with her equipment, a retiree knowing that she would never be turned away again. He pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the golden afternoon light, the dealership's hum fading behind him. In that moment, he felt not like a lone CEO, but like part of a collective movement toward dignity and justice. Each step he took on the concrete forecourt was a testament to the day's journey from prejudice to policy, from silence to solidarity, from exclusion to embrace. A nearby valet, newly trained and brimming with respect, offered Charlie a nod of recognition. Charlie returned it, a silent salute to the daily changes now baked into Parkside's culture. As he reached his vehicle, he paused to admire the Escalade's sleek lines, the cargo system's gleaming modules still in place. That intersection of design and defiance embodied everything he stood for. Settling into the driver's seat once more, Charlie's final thought before the engine's comforting purr rose was a quiet vow to carry this ethos of respect and rapid accountability into every boardroom, every partnership, every community where Sterling Dynamics made its mark. Because in the end, lasting change is built on the belief that no one should ever be shut out, and that the true measure of innovation is not just in products, but in people. With that, he pulled away, leaving behind Parkside Motors transformed and heading into a horizon where every story of injustice could become a story of justice, each one reclaimed, each one shared, and each one a call to action for all.